Never ever have enough time to play it all. You know everybody wants to.
Here we are back at the Otter Creek in Rio Grande, contemplating next moves. So I've got a really good understanding and idea of what's going to take place here. I'm really excited to do it, but unfortunately I'm not ready to do it. And I think what has to take place is that this area here, because this bridge lifts out, I'm within a couple of millimeters of having all of the bridge piers exactly where they need to be. I just need to mark somewhere on the road spline so I'll know exactly where to glue them. In order to be able to remove this, to do all that, I need to shore up what's going to happen with the spline going out, because I want to repeat the same kind of mortise and tenon joint that I have here on the other side. And unfortunately, that also means making sure that I've got all of my risers at the correct level for whatever grade I want to take up to Hellgate area. So that's going to be the focus of what we're doing today, is messing with this spline. We'll see how long it takes. The spline is glued right up to this riser there. And from there to the previous riser right in here somewhere, all of that is the same height. So leaving from here going up to Hellgate is kind of where I'm at. I need to do some mathing, figure out the grade, because I've kind of gone back and forth between stopping the grade here and continuing on to Hellgate without a grade, which I think is what that riser there represents. I think the top of the spline there is the same height as Hellgate. I can't remember. But I also am going to take a spur off of this track that goes into the mine. So there's definitely some adjustments that have to be considered in there with the spline. But I think what would make the most sense would be to continue the grade as it needs to be to get from whatever height I am back over here coming off of the bridge, and whatever it's going to be at Hellgate, just let that grade be natural. It's going to be less than 2%, I'm sure. I'm going to have to do some mathing and figure that out. And then, of course, I've got plenty of room to come down with this if I need to, and if I have to come up, I could come up as well. But that whole thing right there is going to be dependent on what the spline does. All right, I'm going to do some mathing and then probably cutting some spline. what I'm doing here is I'm getting my run. So I've figured out from Hellgate all the way back to the bridge, I've got 5 pieces of spline there. So I need another 20 to make it all work. And to get, accurate measurements on what the actual risers are going to be, because these are just temporary, so I could figure out what my run was going to be. In order to get all of that very accurate, I need to have an accurate run. Now, as far as the what it's going to look like, I'm crossing over right here. So envision plunging terrain, and then there will be a tunnel portal here that is a snow shed. I need a snow shed. I need at least one snow shed. There's got to be a snow shed. And I've kind of had this place in mind for a long time for a snow shed. There may be more. I just don't know where they're going to be. So the next step is to pull all of this back off. I'm going to mark it, so that I can lay this back out and know that the run is the exact same outside or laying on the floor as it is in here, so I can measure it, and then I'll know what my grade will be. I'll probably talk about that in a future segment. I think I've got all of the measurements I need to make my risers. And this is Railroad Boy, railroadboy.com up here. And this is a website by Jeff Detray. And I stumbled onto this, years ago, and I have used this particular grade calculator for pretty much everything I've done on the railroad. So what I've figured out is that my rise is 18.5 centimeters. I have converted everything into centimeters just to make things easier, and I think it's just a little bit more accurate when you do it that way. And my run, which is 36 feet, 11 1/8 inch, shakes out to be 1125.5 centimeters. So that gives me an effective grade of 1.64%. And, I do have some radii on this, but they're not much, not enough for me to worry. I've got some radii that is probably around 20 inches on the rest of the spline, which is at 2%. So you can kind of see if you have a 20-inch radius curve, that's going to turn it into a 3.24. Of course, it's all kind of relative to the length of train and everything else. But I know that this grade and the radiuses that I have going up to Hellgate is not going to affect this enough for me to be concerned about. So what this tells me is if I want a constant grade of 1.64% from the bridge all the way to Hellgate, then each riser every 2 feet or 61 centimeters needs to go up by 1 millimeter. So that's what I'm looking at. Now let's take a quick look back at the layout because there is some things to consider before I start mass producing risers. What I'm up against concerning the grade coming up to here is this distance from there to there. And as it stands right now, if I were to place this foam directly on the plywood and kind of get rid of this 2x, I'm looking at, I think it's 10.5 centimeters, give or take. So down at this far end where my first riser is, I'm 10.3. So if I continue at a 1.64% grade up to here, you can see that this is going to go all the way down to the ground. So it's kind of coming back to me as to why I had things, you know, the way they were in here. I can't remember exactly what my overall rationale was, but I'm sure it had to do with this. But one thing that I know I didn't do is I did not cut any risers and make adjustments according to the building and the track height. So I think, you know, that's the least I could do is go ahead and get some scrap, cut some risers at the 1.64% grade, and see what that looks like coming around the backside. Because remember, the goal is to come off of the spline with the spur track until I get to here. Which, you know, there could be a slight downward grade to that, I'm okay, but it can't be anything super significant. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go ahead and for sure figure out where the risers need to be, and then go ahead and cut a few of them at the new grade and see what I come up with. I've got that first run of spline in at the new grade. So down here at this end, at the top of the track level, I'm running right at about 43 scale feet from the plywood. And as you can see, that causes a problem with track level up here, which is my goal. Up there, I think I'm at about 57 scale feet from the plywood up to there. So the trick here is, how do I make up that difference? And so I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and cut this down somehow, some way, about 14 scale feet, just so I can see what it looks like. I don't hate the height that this is at, but I have really liked the height that that's at. So I've got to see it. I've got to see how that looks in the scene to the best of my ability to make a decision. I think the easiest way to do this is just to remove this and all the other garbage that I've got here. Now, I've got a 3/8 piece of plywood here, and I want to keep that for sure. I'm just not sure if I can. I want to get an accurate measurement is what I want to do. The difference between the height of where the spur will come out at and the top of this wall section here, The difference is 4.7 centimeters. So I'm going to lop off 4.7 centimeters of these 2x and see what it looks like. It definitely loses some of the majestic quality that it had at the higher elevation. Now, that being said, this is definitely a safer route to go for a couple of different reasons. Obviously, a less severe grade to climb is always an advantage. And then the other thing to kind of consider is, you know, if I'm going to have a valance in here, the higher this is, kind of the more difficult that becomes, because I don't think you want that to disappear up underneath the valance. All things to consider, and I think I'm just going to have to sleep on it and maybe look at it, you know, for a half a day or something like that, and then come back and think about it. And the problem with that, of course, is I can't really do anything permanent with the bridge and making the connections I need to make there, because I'd like to have this spline solid at least to this point before I go any further with pulling the bridge out to work on the river. So I don't know, I'm gonna think about it. Well, I've slept on it, and nothing magical happened overnight that made me feel any better about its height. Now, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just that it's been at the height that it's been at for the last year, and I've gotten so used to it. Now it just doesn't look right. So I don't want to rush to any decisions. So I'm going to stop what I'm doing now. I've got multiple other things that I need to do this weekend. It's just one of those things where I need to do other things like we all do from time to time. So I'm going to let this breathe for a whole another week, and I'll be in and out throughout the week, and maybe I'll be able to make a better decision or feel better about the right decision, because sometimes you know what the right decision is, but you're stubborn. So maybe you don't want to make the decision. Now, before I go, I do want to point out one thing about the spline. If you're someone who's maybe thinking about spline and you're just not sure yet, I thought I would kind of point this out as just kind of as a cool thing. So here you can kind of see the top of that spline, and if you'll watch what happens, just as soon as you kind of bend it this way, you can see that it creates a natural easement, and it changes the shape back over here. And if you run this as the middle spline, you know, that's where the center line of your track is going to be. And, you know, I do 5 pieces, so there's 2 to each side of this. And sometimes there ends up being more, but just knowing where your center spline is the gauge for where you put your cork before you lay your track. So there's that. All right, I'm going to get out of here, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you around.